And here's an interesting story. The Police and Crime Commissioner for Durham has revealed that his force is no longer prosecuting people who grow their own cannabis or use small amounts of the drug. Ron Hogg says people will get a caution unless somebody complains about what they do or if their behaviour is what he describes as blatant. Mr. Hogg was speaking to Alfie Joey on BBC Radio Newcastle this morning.
What we're saying is we have clear priorities, and at the end of the day, growing cannabis is illegal and people will be dealt with. If it's small scale, they're likely to get a caution. This happened recently in the case within the force in the concert area. What we're saying is that the communities here in County Durham and Darlington want us to go after the people who are making millions of pounds out of producing and selling drugs, and that's what we'll do. They want us to tackle street dealers, and that's what we'll do. But let's be clear, if a member of the community says that people next door are growing cannabis, we will go and we'll deal with that.
But if people are taking these drugs, I mean, people are worried that this can lead to paranoia, schizophrenia. It can be quite serious, if you're taking it.
It can be quite serious, but can we put this into context? We accept, and I come from the point of view that all drugs cause harm if they're abused. The drug that causes us the biggest problems is alcohol, and that's legal. And what I'm trying to do here is just open up the whole debate about drugs and how we tackle the drug problem that we have across our country, and some of that drug problem is legal. We accept that there are medical conditions associated with cannabis, which is why if we find someone who's a low-level user, rather than prosecute, we'll suggest that they could go on a checkpoint course with us, whereby we seek to take them off the drug. So my whole stance is about don't use the drug, they are harmful, let's move to a point of recovery. And that's the whole idea of decriminalisation.
And is that not what the papers are worried about? Is that not what the public are worried about? Oh, I'll go on a course if I do something wrong instead of being punished.
Well, it's not instead of. The opportunity is to work with us to try and address the habit. If the individual then fails to engage, we will go through the route of prosecution and so forth.
Just quoting the papers again, because they're a day late with this almost, Ron. You quoted in the Daily Mail as saying you want to deal with people who use a small amount of cannabis in a fair, measured way. But the photo posted on the Force's Facebook shows a huge cannabis plant found in a homemade tunnel in Medhamsley, a polytunnel, one of these greenhouse things. Is this not a problem out there that needs to be dealt with properly?
Can we be quite clear? We've been trying to deal with this problem for over 40 years under the current legislation. That's what has been defined as dealing with it properly, and it hasn't worked. So what we're trying to do is to get a different route, an alternative route. I can remember in the late 70s, early 80s, finding cannabis plants in people's houses. Here we are, 2015, it's still happening. If anyone can persuade me that the current legislation strategy is working, fine, but they've got a hard job to do.
I mean, parents living in County Durham, they posted it on the Force's Facebook page saying this will leave people growing the drug, laughing at the law, sends out the wrong message. Is this softly?
It isn't softly. It's about trying to tackle the problem and to actually get people weaned off drugs. And we all know that, years gone by, people would be arrested, prosecuted, and possibly even imprisoned. Haven't you heard about the drug problem in prisons? Prisons find it very difficult to keep drugs out, and there's a real issue there. So we have to have a real debate about this, a real think about this, and I just want to broker a new way forward.
Well, that was the Durham Police and Crime Commissioner called Ron Hogg speaking to Alfie Joey on BBC Radio Newcastle. We spoke to the Home Office, who said the following: growing cannabis, whether for personal use or organised supply, is illegal. Those who do so can face significant jail sentences. The government has no plans to legalise cannabis, as there is a clear scientific and medical evidence it can damage people's mental and physical health, which doesn't really approach what the Commissioner was talking about. But anyway, that's the statement we've got. Obviously, we'd like to hear from you. I guess there'll be those listening who've got a couple of cannabis plants growing at home because they are a cannabis user. Perhaps you have a personal rather than a professional interest. Perhaps you're a health worker or a police officer, indeed. Interesting what your thoughts would be on all this. As I say, we've got a crowded programme, but always got time for your calls. 85058 is the text number. 0500 909 693 is the phone number. Or you can tweet at BBC 5 Live. Get a couple of perspectives on all of this with Greg Hoedt first, and in a moment I'm going to talk for somebody about addictions as well. But Greg is from something called the UK Cannabis Social clubs. It's a kind of network of people who just use cannabis. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah, it's people that use cannabis for either medical reasons or for just because they enjoy it socially, as also spiritual users, and they sort of like come together to stand up against prohibition. No one else is, so they've decided they should.
Yeah, so do you find that police take the kind of attitude which the Commissioner is spelling out? Is that really in de facto, is that the way it's happening?
It's moving towards that direction, yes. Obviously, Ron Hogg has been quite brave and standing forward with his view. He's got a lot of experience in this. He used to be a police officer as well, so it's something that we shouldn't be really taking lightly when someone in his position says that this is the direction we need to go.
Yeah. In practice, if you say, I've got a couple of plants and somebody catches you, do you at the moment, what do you hear from your members? Are you likely to finish in court, or are police just likely to
It really is a lot of postcode lottery at the moment. It does depend where you are and if the police like you or not. When they come through your door, really, it depends what kind of complaint they've had. I've just recently been gathering some information. We've had a lot of people claiming that police are using discretion when they come to their homes and find a certain amount of cannabis plants, whether it be 1, 2, 10, or even up to 30. People have been given a caution, especially if they've been using cannabis medically and they've got proof from a doctor
that they need it,
that they use it, or that proof that it helps their condition. Even solicitors have been able to sort of deal with the situation in the station, and people will have a caution. They do lose their plants and their medicine, which is not very helpful. A lot of the time people find strains that work for them that have taken a long time to get and are unable to find again.
Yeah.
And that's not fair on people that use it as a medicine.
Okay. Well, I can stay with us, but I mean, because there are, of course, dangers to this drug. It's another drug, and we shouldn't let this item pass without outlining what might happen to you if indeed you choose to join in the game. Simon Stevens, Director of Casework for Addictions UK, based in the North East. When people say cannabis, do you say, Simon, what do you say?
I have no problem with cannabis use per se. I have no problem with people drinking alcohol. But a significant proportion of people who indulge in either of those find that they develop mental problems or social problems.
Okay.
So it's a thing to be taken seriously.
So you have to, and it's a fair point to make that booze, it's another one of those things which will have its impact on your mental state and your physical state. So what problems might cannabis cause? What are the facts here?
Well, we know that it can either bring on mental problems earlier if you are prone to those mental problems. There is a body of evidence that says it can cause mental problems.
A body of evidence, but not an overwhelming one? I mean, how do you assess that?
The body of evidence, no evidence in psychology can be said to be 100%.
No.
We're not that advanced in understanding how the brain actually works and how it responds to things. But certainly many, many people, a significant minority of people, do present with mental health problems.
Right. Stay with us. I mean, Greg, do you accept, you and your mates who run these clubs, that like any other drug you put into your body, there are health implications, mental health, physical health, it can harm you?
We actually have quite a few people that help run our clubs, and they don't put their names forward and say that they do this because of their job, but they are like health workers and drug workers, and they see the damage that hard drugs do in society, and they've seen the benefit that people have got off of using cannabis.
But that wasn't the question I asked.
No, well, it is part of the answer, because people have moved off harder drugs like opiates, cocaine, and alcohol by using cannabis.
So the question I asked is, do you accept it can harm you?
I don't think that all drugs are without harm, but I do believe that the way the market is shaped and the lack of control in the market causes some of these issues. If people are only allowed to get hold of the strongest strain, it's like prohibition was in America with alcohol. People were getting really strong strains that they don't necessarily want or need. People want good quality cannabis, and there's a lot of that available now, but that tends to be synonymous with strength. It doesn't have to be. If we had regulated cannabis social clubs, people will be able to go and access a range of strains from 5% to 20% THC. They have CBD in it, which is actually being studied by a government licensed pharmaceutical company.
How do you measure then the strength? How do you measure the strength?
By testing the cannabinoid ratio. It's quite simple. There's gas or liquid gas chromatography. that you can do in a lab. It will tell you how much THC, which is the psychoactive part, how much CBD, which is a non-psychoactive part, which actually sort of counters the effect of the psychoactive effect it has, and also has a range of medical effects like antispasmodic, anti-seizure, anti-epileptic.
So if you measure the kind of the strong ones, I'm no expert on this matter, but I mean, what skunk or whatever else might be out there. If you measure some of it, then it is more damaging. You would say that?
Not necessarily, because GW Pharmaceuticals have several strains, as well as Bedrocan, which is the Dutch pharmaceutical cannabis. Their signature strain is actually 19% THC and less than 1% CBD. Now, that's the government's definition of skunk, yet they're prescribing that to patients that need it as medicine. So what the government's saying doesn't actually make too much sense.
Okay, thank you, Greg. I mean, Simon, do you feel, I get the feeling, having listened to Greg, that I want a bit more definitive information here, because he's telling me things I don't know, and in a way, perhaps a clear debate on the situation should begin with the facts.
There is a clear debate going on, but there are bodies of evidence on both sides. One says, yes, it does have medical benefits, and another says, well, no, it doesn't. And that's clearly a debate to be had. What you have to really look at is, what is it about an individual that they are so unhappy with their present state that they want to alter their state of mind in order to be comfortable with themselves? And when you're actually looking at that, for a lot of people, that is because they have underlying emotional and social problems. The thing is, don't cover that up. Don't wrap that up in a bandage. Why don't we go and solve the problem itself? If you're taking drugs because you are simply not happy with the way you are, which is essentially what's been said, we want to alter the way we feel, then there is something wrong with us as a society.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm going to turn the debate and talk about drones in a moment, but I hear we've got a caller on this. Lee, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Yeah, hi Lee. I'm sorry for my uncertainty, but I think you've just rung up and I was just told that you were there. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you'd like to say.
Yeah, well, I'm currently a serving police officer. One of the sort of things I think needs to happen is we've got to start looking at the drugs issue and the way that we police them and the way that we deal with them. We need to look at them as sort of a health issue rather than something that we can just enforce and force people to stop taking them, because it doesn't work. We've tried it for so long and it quite clearly doesn't work. So
do police officers generally feel that, in a way, it's kind of hopeless? They're almost wasting their time here because it's going to happen anyway, isn't it? And they're just going around,
I certainly think the shift in attitude, I've sort of been in 13 years, even in the time that I've been in, I think there's been a shift in attitude that, there probably is some... But police officers don't want people to take drugs. There's issues with people taking drugs. I'm not an advocate for people taking them. I'm just saying the way that we look at them, it's got to be done on an evidential rather than...
Yeah, in a funny way, Lee, earlier in the day we were talking about children in class and how you deal with disruptive behaviour, and the consensus seemed to be, well, you set out, first of all, a list of rules as to why behaviour should be better and what is expected and what the consequences are. And in a way, perhaps we need to approach drugs right at the start like that. If everybody knows exactly what the consequences are, what the problems are, what's available, then maybe that will be a good start.
In some countries, the consequence for dealing in drugs and possession of drugs is death, and it still doesn't work. People still take drugs, and people still take that risk. There's a lot of money to be made, and just one other issue I would say, and I think the reason why the police force in Durham have sort of come out and took this stance is the amount of cuts that the police service and other public services have taken from this government and will continue to take. What do we stop policing? Because we can't, we as a police force and we as public services, we can't keep the same level of service up if we don't have a decent amount of money. And do we stop looking at mental health issues? Do we stop doing burglaries? Do we stop looking at soft drugs, hard drugs?
That's another problem we have to do with, Lee. That's a wider debate, but I'm very grateful indeed for you to get in touch with us. Thank you for that. That's Lee in Manchester. And I move on because Another issue I want to deal with before we get to the news. I warned you it was a busy programme. I want to talk about drones.